Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. And our sponsor isn't here, but we're going to go ahead anyway. And I see our tennis player coming. Thank you. Thank you. You people, as you wander around and do your walking, which is a form of meditation, you might just look carefully at the flowers and the things you see as you wander along, and look at the grace of them, and I can tell you a little thing to do, and that's the talks, the grand esoteric talks, are just talks unless they've got something to do in it, to tell you how to do it. And finally we come along and we hear someone say, well, here is something to do and how to do it. Well, I didn't used to love nature because I was a soldier for a very long time, and all the earth represented to me was something to dig a hole in, to stay alive, or to bury someone in that I loved, or someone that maybe, as appearances go, I had killed. And trees were things that caused tree bursts, were artillery shells and mortar shells, and so trees weren't things of beauty, they were things to stay away from, or to knock down with artillery. And so I didn't used to love nature. And I was with an old Chinese gentleman, and I was being pursued by a Japanese patrol, and it appeared that the patrol was gaining on us, and I was with this elderly gentleman who felt that he didn't have the strength to get up the mountain, and we were going up a mountain. And I kept telling him, come on, let's go, we got to hurry, get a wiggle on. And when we finally got to, I thought it was the last mountain, when we got to the top of this one mountain, where we could look over it and see down below, there was just another mountain in the distance, one obviously there to climb again. And so it was a disheartening thing to see. But here was Mr.shieh, and he was so tired that he was retching, he was throwing up, and he was sick. And I was distraught because I wanted him to come on. I wanted to go, let's go, because it would seem that our tangible life depended on it. But, and furthermore, the thought was occurring to me at the time that if either of us were to be captured, his chances of survival were much greater than mine, because he could feign being a Chinese civilian, and whereas I could feign nothing. And so I thought, well, perhaps if worse comes to worse, I can leave him. And these thoughts were going through my mind, and he knew it. And yet here we were on the top of the mountain, and he's faced with the prospect of capture and almost certain death, and faced likewise with the possibility, and almost a sure possibility, of being deserted, just left because I was young. And he wasn't. And so here he is on the top of the mountain, and I'm urging to come on, but I finally sat down alongside him for a minute, and when I did, he points to this mountain off in the distance that he knew as well as I did that we had to climb. And with the eyes of a poet, and with the eyes of love, he says, look over there just to the left of the peak in the crevice of the mountain, and look closely and tell me what you see. And I can remember that my reply was, I see another damned mountain that if we don't get up off our tails and start climbing, we're not going to make. And I was more profane than that, I can assure you. But he says, no, now look carefully in the crevice of the mountain, and notice, and look closely and tell me what you see. And I saw only a mountain, I saw only anguish and agony over there. But he says, If you look closely, you will see a little purple flower, and it's beginning to bloom. This is the time of year for a little small purple mountain flower. Anemone or something, is that the name of it? I don't remember, but he knew. And here was a man who's faced with death, faced with desertion, sick and wretched. And what does he see? He saw beauty. And I wanted to know what his secret was. I wanted to know how, in the face of what appeared to be lack, what appeared to be steel cold-heartedness, what appeared to be the intellectual, mathematical, scientific precision of warfare, he could still see beauty, and still feel tenderness and love. This same man, I might add, I met, and right after I met him, I got him because I was the junior officer in the crowd, and I didn't want him because he was the older man, and I thought, well, he won't be able to keep up with me, and he was the last interpreter, and I was stuck with him. But I no sooner had gotten him than I found out that just a week, well, now let me say this, he was very jolly and had a beautiful look, a countenance that glowed, and everywhere he went, people would cluster around to talk to him, and the children loved him. And I thought to myself, gee whiz, not only do I have an old man, I've got a socialite on my hands besides. But I no sooner got him than I found out that just something like a week or 10 days or 2 weeks before, his wife and daughter had been killed. His wife and daughter had been killed. Furthermore, right in his presence, they had been killed. Brutally. His wife had been assaulted by the invading enemy down in Hong Kong. And yet here was this man full of life and light and vigor. And I remember I called him into my tent. This was in Kunming, China at the time. And I called him in and I asked him if all of this was true about his wife and daughter. And he said yes. And I said, well, first I want to tell you that I'm sorry for you and I commiserate in your anguish, but I'm new here in China, and I just can't understand your absolute total disregard for life. How in the world can you be jolly under such a set of? How in the world can you be a happy man when you've seen your wife raped to death? And he said, well, during these past few days I've learned a little bit about you too. And he says, I understand that you've studied religion and philosophy and that this is your interest. And he says, furthermore, I understand that and then he named a particular religion that I was interested in deeply at the moment. And he said, that a religion that says that there is no death, that death isn't real. And he said, the actions that you see me going through, the actions that you see me living, is not my disregard. It's not my disregard for life. But what you see me living is my absolute confidence that life is eternal and that death is unreal. Well, this is the man with whom I studied for a very long time. And whom I love. All right, now we've got several things cut out to do this afternoon that people have been trying to understand for 7,000 years and have never understood, but there's no reason why it can't be understood here now. How about that? The resolution of dualism. You see, in philosophy proceeds with its reason and logic to a point at which time it is confronted with the essence or the very obvious presence of a dualism that it has never resolved. Take our metaphysical philosophy. They proceed up to a point where we have what we call real on the one hand and unreal on the other. Even while it says there's no such thing as a dualism, it still has its reality on the one hand and its unreality on the other. It has its spirit on the one hand and it has matter on the other, and there has never been a resolution of this. And I think that the time has come that it can be resolved. I know that I have for myself resolved it. And while I'm not certain that I can ever find the words to say it, I keep trying. And I think that if you don't pay any attention to the words that I'm going to use, that you can find it resolved here and now, too, for yourself. The resolution of dualism. Remember once Jesus was asked, when will we see the kingdom of heaven? And his reply was, when you make the above is the below, the first is the last, the inside is the outside, and the male and the female into a single one. He kept talking about when you see the single one, when you come into oneness, when you come into singleness. And it's because of those statements, and many like them by many other teachers around the world, that it has been decided that dualism is not where it's at, and that there has to be a resolution of dualism. Well, now, obviously, as we look about the tangible arena, the minute you see anything that's finite, that is, that has a measure or has a boundary, has a beginning or an end, you are able to see its opposite. The minute a word is uttered, words being finite and man-made, it's not possible to utter a single sound that there isn't its opposite. It's equal and opposite. You know that science says that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. We look out and we see, obviously, male and female. It appears to be basic in the structure, in the appearance of the structure of life. We see in flowers and trees and whatnot, male and female. We see light, and in the evening we see darkness. We see health, and we see ill health. So who can deny then that there is the appearance of a dualism? Let's face it. But even if we finally get everything down to a belief and dream of material living, as it's put in Christian Science and in religious science and unity and New Thought, many of the Western concepts, the belief and dream of material living, you still have a belief and dream of material living as opposed to what is the not belief and the not dream of material living. You still have a dualism. Even if we say it's a seeming, you do have the seeming and the not seeming. So we have not resolved this dualism by the use of such terms as belief or dream or a real identity and an unreal. The use of the term seeming doesn't do away with it. It's helpful, and it comes along. It's pretty helpful for a while to say, well, gee whiz, things are not as they appear, and this is just belief. Belief. And let's get rid of belief. But you've still got belief and non-belief. You've still stuck with a dualism. So suppose now we come to an end of this matter. Remember, again, in all of the philosophies of the world, those that speak of the so-called last days of the belief and dream, the last days of humanity or mortality or dream. They say that in those days the day and the night shall be the same. Once upon a time I had a grand religious experience, or spiritual experience, whatever you want to call it. It was, you've all heard me talk about it. I won't go into it again. I stood up and all things will become new. I just had one of the experiences of release that I told you about this morning. And I walked as though my feet were on fire. And that night I walked up onto a mountain and I experienced that night the very opposite of this grand, beautiful experience. The counterpart of it, the opposite of it, a miserable agony and anguish beyond all belief, such that that night, if I could have, I would have hurled myself off the mountain. But during that time, I got myself a campfire all set to go, but I didn't light it. And sitting there in the darkness, I looked out and saw a brilliant Alabama night with stars shining everywhere, and I became aware of a very simple fact that I would ask all of you to just listen and consider with your heart now. I looked out and I saw a dark sky. But had that sky not been dark, would have never made the stars apparent. And so for once in my life, I said to the darkness, you are at least delineating the light. A darkness that delineates the light. And then I said, well, now, why in the world do I need the delineation? Why do I need the darkness? Since light is real, everything is light, really. A physicist right now will tell you that there is no such thing as darkness, really. Darkness is only the hypothetical absence of light. Right now, if we were to pull the blinds in the room, you'd say, this is a dark room, but is it? No, because you can burn the tables, and they'll turn to light. You can burn the carpet, maybe, or set your clothing on fire, or you can burn the newspapers up there or something, and you'll see that what appears to be opacity or opaqueness or density or not light can be quickly turned into light. Or if you get real scientific, you can take the energy that is there, the molecules, the atoms, and you can, by either fission or fusion, one way or another, you can convert it into tremendous light, such as we've done with our atomic weaponry and so forth, a light that's blinding, brighter than the sun. So, but let's say that, let's say there is no furniture in here, and we pump out all the air. Well, even the walls then that contain the darkness can be turned into light. Well, suppose we become very intellectual about this thing and say, look, let's don't have a room with a vacuum and let's move out where the Pleiades is, and let's go out into an outer space where there is a matterless void out there, and nothing to turn into energy and light. Then, just the physicist, not the metaphysician, but just the simple 5th grade science student now would tell you that the consciousness or the awareness that would say, here is darkness, that awareness itself is light. What is awareness that is aware right here, right now, except the cognition of form, of light itself? So you see then that even all the scientists will tell you that darkness is a hypothetical absence of light. But what does it do? What does it do? It serves the purpose of allowing us to know what light is. Now, I call this, now it's important that you understand this, that this awareness is alone and basic. You've never been concerned with anything but this awareness, and we've already determined this morning that this awareness is the functioning of mind, God, and that there is no other functioning going on. And so therefore this functioning is the action of mind. And we're talking about a universe, one mind that is alone in all. So therefore this action is the only action going on, and so we can call it omni-action, all action, the only action, the only functioning that's going on. And really, this is true for you. You've never been concerned with any other functioning. What appears to be somebody else thinking is only a vision included within your own thinking. What appears to be a life out there or somebody out there is only a concept that you include within yourself, too. So there's really just one functioning, one thinking going on your own right here. Okay, this sleepy time, so I'm going to shake you here maybe with a new idea. This awareness that's aware now is the only knowing going on. The gentleman this morning said awareness is knowing. Yes, it's knowing. So it's the only knowing going on, and so therefore what is it? How wise is it? It's omniscience. The identity that I'm calling your attention to, the identity you are, I'm not telling you that you're smart. I'm not telling you that you are just brilliant. I'm telling you that you are omniscient. That this awareness is omniscience itself. Here and now, already, without wait, even though you might think you're pretty stupid, even though you might think you're pretty dense and pretty dumb and that you're hearing a lot of things that you can't comprehend. It doesn't make any difference what you think or don't think. The awareness that's here, presently aware, is omniscience, in action, going on. Why? Once again, why? Because it's the only awareness that you've ever been concerned with, and it's the functioning of infinite mind. So therefore, this functioning is infinite intelligence. Going on. Right here, right now. All right, now you are omniscient. That means that you are infinitely intelligent. At this point in one of my talks one time, a young lady said, well, or a young man, I don't remember, but they said, well, then if you are so darn smart, what is the square root of, and she gives me a big number. Or do you know the chemical, why don't you know the chemical composition of that which makes the laurel leaf shine, if you are omniscience itself? Who says that omniscience is supposed to be a computer that can spit out intellectualism, that can answer all of the things that pertain to the belief and dream? If I'm talking to you about an identity that is dreaming itself and having all kinds of dream experiences, and you feel yourself to be a figure in a dream, and you're having all kinds of ordeals within the dream, maybe you're being chased by a bear or something, and if all of a sudden I speak of an identity that is omniscience itself, I have reference to an identity that is the identity that is in the bed very comfortable and not really being chased by bears, am I not? I'm talking about another identity. Now, the questioner that would say, why don't you know the square root, is still involved with the bear and who's chasing what and how many leaves are on the tree in the dream. And that isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about an infinite identity that this awareness is. We've pointed out how infinite it is because it includes every grain of sand and every thought and every idea and every feeling that's ever been felt. This is the identity you are. It is the functioning of the ineffable, the illimitable ineffable, and it's therefore the only functioning going on. It is the ineffable self-knowledge, self-knowing, self-recognition, self-cognition. So therefore this awareness that you are right here, right now is omniscience. Not omniscient, but omniscience itself. That doesn't mean that you can spit out facts like a computer. It means that here in this tangible arena you know what you need to know when you need to know it. If you're driving your automobile and you don't know which way to turn, it means that, well, if you relax and stop for a minute and quit being the dumb one and assume the identity as omniscience itself, you can just sit there free and easy for a minute and you'll say, well, gee whiz, I'll ask somebody which way to go. Or I'll look at the street sign. And you'll find yourself knowing what you need to know when you need to know it. That's all the matter of being omniscient is. And furthermore, you are omnipresence itself. And you will find that you are where you need to be at all times. You are where you are supposed to be at all times, and you are doing, since you are Omni-action, you are doing what you're supposed to be doing at all times, and you're not guilty of any mistakes in the past or in the future. Never have you been guilty of anything. All right, so we've determined now that this awareness is omniscience. Now, omniscience means all wise. Now, how wise is infinite wisdom. Now here we come down to the crux, and here's where I suppose I get all the intellectual arguments, and I don't know whether I have time to go through all of this or not, but I hope that you'll just take my word for some of this and later kick it around. But just understand that infinite means without bounds, without restraints, without restrictions, that it can't be bound. And when we say that isness, or the immutable, is limited to just, well, let's just say science. We've got here in the West a grand cult of belief that would say that everything at its heart and soul is scientific and true. The tangible universe is scientifically and mathematically precise. But let's just take this matter of saying that all wisdom, or that wisdom is scientific, and we would say that that infinity is scientific. I'm saying this poorly, but I ask you a simple, elementary, intellectual question. Can infinity be bound to being scientific? Can the boundless be bound to being scientific? If it could, would it be boundless? Would it? It would be bound, and therefore it wouldn't be infinite. And so we wouldn't be talking about infinity at all. By science we mean the orderly presentation of knowledge. According to the dictionary, that's one of the definitions. Now, can God, or an illimitable business, be bound to an orderly presentation of knowledge? Or would it not then be finite if it was nothing but the orderly presentation? Well, anybody, including a dum-dum like me, can look out across a field. When I say me, Bill is the dum-dum, but awareness, the awareness that is aware here, the one awareness that you are, is omniscience. There's nothing dumb about that. But from a finite point of view, one can look out across the field, and you can see that there is, in addition to the science that's there, the beautiful balance of nature that's there, you can see that the wind has scattered the seed with beautiful randomness. There's more than order there. There is randomness there too. Every artist knows that art is the application of science, and it includes its random presentation as well. You can see that the trees grow as they grow, not necessarily all lined up in a row. So we find, but now if we get our electron microscopes out and get very intellectual about it, we can look at the random flower and we can find a beautiful precision within it. So what do we find? We find not only a scientific thing that is there at a minute and intellectual level, but if we look at the whole scene, we can also see that a randomness is there. So we have then a wisdom that includes its scientific presentation as well as its random presentation, and one within the other. So once again, what have I said? Gosh, I'm having a hard time. I'm just saying that infinite wisdom is who and what we are right here, right now. And if we believe that infinite wisdom is limited only to a presentation that makes sense, philosophic sense, intellectual sense, scientific sense, inspiring sense, then we're not talking about infinity at all. We're talking about something that's limited to intellectual sense, philosophic sense, religious sense, inspiring sense, and so forth. So this awareness that's aware right now is illimitably aware, infinitely aware, beyond intellectualism, above and beyond intellectualism, to include also the randomness that the heart is. Love is. That love is. Love, there's nothing very scientific about love, you know. Just look and see. how unscientific love is. You want to look and see, you can see a man who loves a woman, you wonder, everybody says, my gosh, how in the world could he love her the way she acts and what she does and the way she looks and whatnot, and yet he loves her with a grand delight, with a passion. Why? Because love goes beyond intellectualism. It's above it. Love understands intellectualism, but intellectualism can't understand love at all. All right, infinite wisdom now knows then beyond everything that makes sense. It knows also what doesn't necessarily make intellectual sense. So this awareness that's aware right here, right now, is infinitely aware. I'm telling you that you are omniscience itself. Now let's see how this fits into this practical thing here. Let's get down here where it really counts. And let's understand about this world that we see here and there, that includes the appearance of loss of dollars, that includes the appearance of death, it includes trials and tribulations, and things that we would like to get rid of, and it includes its dualisms, like I like and I hate, I love and I despise. It includes good and evil. And let's see if we can resolve all of that into a single one so that it makes sense. Heartfelt sense, and hopefully maybe even intellectual sense. Okay, let me change the scene just a little bit. And let's just pretend that right here, right now, that we are society, we are the world, and we want to have a good intellectual definition of what wealth is. What is wealth? So that we can hear it preached from the institutions of the world, so that we can read it in the books, and so that we can teach our children and others what wealth is. Now, we're just using wealth because we're really talking about supply, and in the answer to the matter of supply, we find all answers, even the one about life and death, light and darkness. Here we are as society, and over on one side of the room we've got, say, Mr. John D. Rockefeller, who has had money all of his life, and over on the other side of the room we've got Mr. Peter Pauper, who has just managed in the last few weeks to come into a lot of money. Just a few weeks ago. Well, now here as society, what do the institutions of the world do? To whom do they turn to get their definitions of what wealth is? They go to Mr. Rockefeller because he's been wealthy all of his life. He knows all about dollars. He's got plenty of them now. He can't even get rid of them. He couldn't begin to lose them all. He's got them too well invested. And so he gives you a definition of what wealth is. And this is what's taught, and this is what we believed and have believed for a very long time. And at the same time, we know that the absence of dollars is what we call poverty. And so we're still confronted with a dualism. But now, what about Mr. Peter Pauper, who is new wealthy over here, who has just recently, I used to, just the other day in talking about this, we said, we made it, gave an honest illustration. Engelbert Humperdinck, how about that? Who just a few years ago was very poor, and he, as I understand it, was in poor health and so forth, but now he's a millionaire. Well, now, if we were to ask either one of these men to define the term millionaire, they could both give us an honest definition because they both have honestly lived the term millionaire. To ask someone who has never honestly lived it, why then I suppose he would just theorize and he would say, this is what I think it is. You're supposed to have so many dollars in the bank. But these men can give it to you beyond theory because they've got it. And they tell it to you the way it is. But now we're going to ask for a wider definition. We want to know what is the definition of wealth. Wealth. What is wealth? Which of these two men can give us the most honest answer? Which can give us the most honest answer? Only your heart can understand this. But the man who gives us the most, the world has of course turned to Mr. Rockefeller, but the one that can give us the most honest statement about what wealth is Mr. Humperdinck. And why? Because he has lived is not wealth. The hypothetical absence of wealth. The hypothetical absence of sufficiency, we'll put it that way. He believes himself to be a pauper, yet he managed, the now moment was always sufficient, he always managed. But we're talking about now wealth, but we're going to try to use this term sufficiency, which means, like coming back to the here and now, we come back to simple sufficiency, which is what all of the real teachers have always said was all that was ever necessary was just sufficiency. Sufficient unto this now. It's the provision there. Purpose. All right? Who gives us the most or the infinite definition of wealth? Mr. Rockefeller cannot, because he has not lived is not wealth. Mr. Humperdinck over here can give us a much more infinite definition, because he has seen wealth from the standpoint of wealth tangibly present. He's seen it from the standpoint of wealth tangibly absent. So he can give us the most honest definition. Now, by honest, that means the most infinite, the most knowledgeable. Now, what did we say this awareness is? It's infinite wisdom. Not limited wisdom, not finite wisdom. Infinite wisdom. That means that you know beyond intellectualism, and you are certain to learn beyond intellectualism. Now, pretend that you're sunbeam. Now, there is nothing but light in this universe. There's nothing but light. Everything is light. There is nothing but light. Light meaning the light of life, the light that love is, the light that business is, the light that the ineffable is. Everything is light. There is nothing but light, but there appears. Okay, let's pretend now that here we are a sunbeam. How do you know infinitely what a sunbeam is? Without also knowing hypothetically all that a sunbeam is not and could never be, which is what darkness is. Didn't science say that darkness is hypothetical? But it's not really real. Have we not all heard that the human experience is like a belief and dream of material living, that everything isn't as it appears, the railroad tracks don't really come together, that there really is no life and matter, that there's only the belief of being born and a belief of dying and all of that? So haven't we heard all that about a belief? Now, once again, how would a sunbeam know what it is infinitely? Not just in theory like Mr. Rockefeller, but infinitely what it is, without knowing what it is not and could never be hypothetically, called darkness. All right. Everybody at this point at Mountain Brook, at least this is the second day, and this is when the big arguments start. Not arguments, but I mean I get the knives and the people that stomp out and go home and so forth. Because there is the grand disposition to say, now look, what is not, and there's no need to even talk about an is not. Just like there's no need to give to Caesar what Caesar. And they say there is no such thing as is not, so why should I be concerned with it? But the reply is just so, again, it's the simplicity that would hide it from us. The truth is ultra simple. It's because of our tendency to turn everything into a grand intellectual struggle that we've hidden it. Remember, Buddha said, we will clothe it in simplicity and hide it in the heart, and nobody will ever think to look for it there. The answer? This was after somebody suggested that even they had put it out among the stars. And he said, no, it'll be found there, this pearl of great price. So we'll just clothe it in simple simplicity and hide it in the heart. Okay, now the simplicity about this business of is and is not, which sounds like I'm talking dualism. But when I talk about light and its hypothetical absence is not light, I'm not talking about a dualism. I'm talking about what light is and what delineates light, called darkness. Because we've just seen that darkness is what lets us see the stars. I ask you, if you hold up your hand and you look at your hand, if you do not also know that it is not your elbow. Don't see it? Let's be honest. Who is this business about? What is this business about? Wisdom does not know what is not, as the grand absolutist would struggle to tell us, and would hang on that point, especially Western metaphysics, as it's presented and as it has been articulated, that one cannot know what is not, that infinite wisdom does not know what is not. Well, this awareness is infinite wisdom, and if you can look at your hand and know it isn't your foot, you know what is not. You know that it is not a foot, but you're not struggling with that knowledge that it isn't a foot, and you're not going to try to heal it and fight with it and contend with it. You simply know it isn't a foot. You just know it isn't a foot. Now, what's so difficult about that? If you can look at your foot and know it isn't your ear. All right. Now, please understand this, that in the process of becoming acquainted with what identity is, now here is where the explanation of things that for some funny reason metaphysicians, the mystics, the real masters, here and there, all over the world, are so hesitant and reluctant to talk about the thing called suffering because it's so easily misconstrued. And nobody's just going to misconstrue it, because why not? I'm not going to misconstrue it. Awareness isn't going to misconstrue it. Infinite intelligence isn't going to misconstrue it. And this is all that's present. So we're not going to get all bogged down with this matter. If we are out looking at a bunch of trees and we don't know anything about trees, it's just a bunch of trees out there. But now, as infinite wisdom, and because infinite wisdom is certain to soon know all about itself, because it already knows all about itself, it's going to tangibly know all about itself because it already intangibly is itself. So now we decide we're going to go out and begin to know the trees. And here's the tree right outside the window here, and now, as we become acquainted, bit by bit, line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little, that this is a pine tree, do we not simultaneously and unwittingly and perhaps unconsciously and maybe even shockingly and frighteningly, are we not becoming aware at the same time that it is not an oak tree, that it is not a maple tree, that it is not a periwinkle, that it is not, and once again, as we look out there, is it not a combination of a lot of is-nots that allows us to perceive form, tangibility, intellectual tangibility, the perception of form? Is a consciousness of an awful lot of is-nots that seem to be just unconsciously presented in one's experience. For example, here's a very, very beautiful lady over here. Now, you look just above her head, and you can see where it is not head. It's the tree beyond, or the foliage beyond. And just to the right, you can see a flower, and you can see where it is not shoulder and it is flower. Or it is not, and finally all of the is-nots leave a clearly delineated form. Tangibility is a constant recognition of is-nots. We see a tree and we see it isn't the sky above, it isn't the earth beneath, it isn't the meadow on either side, and it leaves us with a clearly delineated form. Now, does anybody want to argue this? These are just intellectualisms that I'm making. The perception of form is also a matter of a knowledge of what is not. Now, if this is true with everything that you see, and if it's true with everything you hear and feel, that what about a knowledge of what identity is in its wholeness and in its completeness? As we approach a knowledge of what identity is, we are simultaneously and most often unwittingly and frighteningly becoming aware of what identity is not and could never be. But during the time that we identify just as a mortal, as a chunk of clay, as a speck in time and space, as the custodian of life, the what identity is not and could ever be was believed to be just as real as what identity is, and knows it is. But when we identify as awareness, which is what identity is, when we identify as omniscience itself, then our knowledge of what identity is not and could never be doesn't throw us into a turmoil and doesn't frighten us. Right? Once we understand that darkness is what delineates light, and that darkness serves the purpose of delineating light, our fear goes out of darkness. We know what purpose it serves. We have understood what is before our eyes, and then that which we wanted to know, the secret of it, was revealed to us. Now, have you all followed me down to this point? I suppose at this point I ought to tell a joke and let everybody relax or something, but we don't have much time, and you're not here to play games. And so I'm going to carry on, and I grant that all of these ideas, whether you know it or not, are tremendously upsetting and disturbing to the old idea of us, to that which comes listening for something that will shore it up and make it happy and make it feel inspired. But we are here coming to grips with a thing called identity, and it is inevitable that as you come to grips with what identity is, you are, whether you know it or not, becoming acquainted also. Since you are infinite intelligence, becoming acquainted with what identity is not and could never be. But this time, if we stay and hang in there as omniscience, as the identity that deity is being, we can understand that what identity is not and could never be is serving a purpose. Now, what purpose is it serving? What purpose is it serving? Well, let's come back again. What purpose does darkness serve? It delineates life. What in the world purpose could ill health serve? Would we ever know infinitely, beyond theory and beyond speculation, what joy is if we did not see what is not joy? A hypothetical is not joy, called agony. You know, at this point, somebody said to me, "Oh gosh, what was that big put down that I got once?" Oh, I can't. Oh gosh, maybe I'll think of it in a minute. But that would have been the appropriate time to tell it. We have seen that infinite intelligence, Mr. Humperdinck would know what wealth is because he had lived is not wealth. And that infinite, I'm getting a blast here from somewhere. You'll have to excuse this. Now I pick up all of this. I don't know why, but I feel all of these ideas, and everybody is with me, and somewhere along the line I've lost you. So to what point do you want me to go back in these explanations? Where shall I go back to? We are about the business of doing something that's never been done, resolving the matter of dualism. Let me just pick it up at another point, if I may. Suppose we again change the field 180 degrees. And let's just talk about music, the principle of music. Nobody here is going to argue the fact that the principle of music is present right here, right now, whether we hear it sounded or not. An intangible and perfect principle is here. Now, the principle is delineated by the finite notes that show it forth. Right? Now the notes are themselves finite, but at the same time they are eternal. Now isn't this strange that we should have an eternal finiteness? Here you can very quickly see that we mean that it is eternal because as long as a symphony exists, and a symphony is going to, that is, the principle of music had no beginning, it has no end, Nothing can destroy it. If there wasn't even an earth, there would still be the principle of music, and consequently the principle is eternal. Now, the notes that delineate it, a note, let's say do or re, is not all there is to the principle, so it's finite, meaning less than infinite. And yet that note, do or re or mi, will exist as long as the principle exists, because the principle will be forever self-delineated. The principle knows what it is. Now maybe the principle of music doesn't, but the principle of life or being or consciousness knows what it's being. Infinite wisdom, which is what God is, forever knows what God is. And this awareness right here, right now, is that knowing going on. But back to the principle, we see that the principle of music is forever being delineated. Well now, this appears to be a two-ness, doesn't it? The principle and its delineation. But are we talking about a two-ness, really? Are we talking about dualism? Are we? Absolutely not, because the principle and its delineation are all one what? One principle. The symphony and the notes that delineate are all one symphony. The television set and its functioning are all one television set about the business of perfectly functioning. Mind and its self-awareness, which is who and what you are, right here, right now, without weight, no struggle, is all one mind. Light, light, real light, tangible light, sunlight, light, or spiritual light, or any other kind of self-same light. Light and that which delineates it, called darkness, is all one light. The physicists will tell you that darkness is only the hypothetical absence of light, but it's really light. So light and its darkness that delineate it are all one light. We're not talking about light and dark anymore. We're talking about one light. And our dualism finally, relative to light and dark, is ended. All of a sudden you can go out into the darkness and you can look at it full in the face and say, hello, light. As dumb as this might sound. Now, this doesn't keep you from stepping in potholes, and it doesn't keep you from bumping into trees, and it doesn't mean that you don't turn your headlights on your automobile, and it doesn't mean that you don't do everything that darkness would appear to demand, but it means that all of a sudden you understand what darkness is, and it is diametrically opposite what we have heretofore believed. It's not something to overcome or to have done with. It is something that serves its purpose of delineating light. Now, come back to health, that is well-being. Well-being is the real. Now wait a minute, let me not leave light. Light, we find out, light is where the authority is. For example, no matter how dark we make this room, no matter how many blinds we put around, we've got total darkness. If you strike the merest spark, where's the authority? What puts what out? You'll notice that the light does away with the darkness, and that the delineator is without power aside to serve its purpose of letting us know what light is. But it serves that purpose. The authority lies with the light. Awareness, consciousness, is what light is. Now what is the opposite of awareness? And what delineates what life is not life. Is not life called or labeled by the world death. Well now, if we can see that light and its so-called opposite is all one light, not a dualism, not a two-ness, not something to struggle and fight with, but something to be understood, can we not see that life and the appearance of is not life called death, is all one life? And can we not, just like we can walk out into the darkness, say, hello light, what are you going to delineate for me tonight? What are you going to teach me tonight? What new star will I see tonight? What new falling star, shooting star will I see the night, building? Right? We can do the same thing when we see what appears to be the appearance of death. It's not death at all. You're looking at life delineated. Life delineated. Life and that which would appear to delineate it are all one life. But yet the appearance serves its purpose, doesn't it? It delineates life. So that we know infinitely beyond theory and speculation. Now I remember what I was going to say. At this time some man asked me once, he said, about this business of theory and speculation, do you mean to say that God would theorize and speculate and have a fiction and have a fairy tale and have a lot of is-nots on the scene? Why would infinite wisdom call God have a lot of is-nots on the scene? Well, again, the reply is a resort to simplicity, coming back home to simplicity, and at the same time it will point out the monumental idiocy of this business of ego that would say, I am the custodian of life, I am the possessor of life. Isn't it funny that we would say mortal mind, or finite mind, or the possessor of life, is quite capable of sitting down and writing a fairy tale, Aesop's fables, or a fiction, or a poem that is maybe just a silly, simple little rhyming line that doesn't necessarily have a meaning. That we can say that mortal mind can do all of those things, and yet infinite mind, unlimited mind, unbound mind cannot see a beautiful fiction, cannot see a dream, cannot see what it knows it is not and could never be, would not know what it is not and could never be. But the difference is, of course, that infinite mind isn't fooled by what is not and could never be, and doesn't buy it as real, and doesn't worry about it, and doesn't suffer with it, and doesn't agonize with it, and isn't frightened by it, and doesn't think that because all of a sudden there's a trial or a tribulation present, delineating triallessness and equanimity and tranquility, that it has to fight with it or contend with it or overcome it or transcend it. All right then, what do you think that the belief of ego is delineating? The belief of a multitude of egos is delineating one egolessness or one divine ego. What do you think that the appearance of ill health is delineating? Well-being. But where is the power and the authority? Where the light is. That is, just like light. Light has the power and authority, and the other one has none, other than to delineate it. Well-being is the real. That is, to use that dualism, real. I'm stuck with words here. But well-being has the power and the authority and the dominion, and the appearance of its opposite, or its delineation, is without power and authority, but it serves the purpose so that we know infinitely beyond theory. Now, because we are infinite wisdom, because we are omniscient, we are about the business of learning infinitely, beyond theory and beyond speculation.